Hello, hello, hello. Today I'm talking with Bruce Charlau. We talked about the difference between IT in movies and IT in reality, and how, for Bruce, the right thing to do is to share what he knows. I'm Yves Hanul from Who's Agile. My pronouns are he and him. Welcome to my channel. You see a lot of agilists around me on this screen. If you want to hear me interviewing, please click that subscribe button because these are the people that I've invited so far. If you think I'm missing people, let me know in the comments. And that like button, well, if you liked today's interview, don't forget to click it. Hello, everyone, and hello with me. I have Bruce. Bruce Charlau, is that how I should pronounce the name?
That's correct. Yeah, Charlo. Yep.
And for everybody to know, we are at this moment. I am in Belgium. Oh, I forgot to put it there. So I'm here in Belgium, and Bruce, you're working from Aberdeen, if I'm correctly.
Yep. Yep. You even got Old Aberdeen there. Yep. Exactly. Yep. That is about where
That's
the university campus is. Yep.
So let's bring you back on screen, and it is here about 15 minutes after 5 o'clock in the evening. What's the time on your side?
My phone tells me it's 13 minutes past 4, so just an hour behind you.
So we see there's a lot of miles, kilometers apart, but still only one time zone, 1 hour apart. And so, well, welcome, Bruce. For the people that don't know you, what do you want people to know about you?
Yeah, we're so many things, I guess. I teach computing science at the University of Aberdeen. I'm in charge of the software engineering part of our undergraduate degree and in charge of our master's in information technology, which is essentially a conversion degree to turn someone from whatever they were before into a nice shiny new software developer. And most of the things I've learned since I was originally hired there about in 2001, have I don't know, accidentally, whatever, moved ever closer and closer to the agile things, and meeting various agilists along the way has just kept nudging me ever closer to get that into the curriculum. I guess that's what I'm in an ongoing struggle forever. It seems even 20 some odd years now after the Agile Manifesto was signed, but still. The other thing, yes, if you heard
I want
American
to
accent,
briefly go a little bit into that because I think the challenge part is interesting because I think most of us were still struggling with what does that really mean, and it's and sometimes I wondered, does it have to do with the fact that people were badly trained or whatever and then have to be converted, whatever that means. But what
I
I'm
do.
hearing is that for people who are even new to IT, that sometimes is a challenge as well. Is that a correct interpretation?
Yep, it's. I guess part of it is the whole media thing, right? The image people, especially undergraduates, have of computing now that they're more familiar with gaming and things. But as you grow up, the programmers, quoting in air quotes, whatever that you see in the media, they're the person that leaps in, does a few commands on a keyboard, and ta-da, it's working, right? Especially in sci-fi, it's an alien keyboard. They leap in, they immediately know what it's doing, right?
Yes, you
That's what
really
people
did that.
see. That's what people see. And then they come and go, oh, I have to learn this new language. I'm horrible at typing. Oh, I can't type very fast. That person there can type really fast. Why is that? They've probably been typing for a long, long time. And in my case, my mother forced me to go to summer school for touch typing. I'm an IBM Selectric many years ago. But yeah, thank you, Mom.
That's a really interesting thing that you add because indeed in the movies it looks very easy and in real life.
Exactly. And then students come and they expect to be able to do that immediately. And no, you have to do this really small console application, and you have to learn how to use the command line a bit, and all of these other things. Eventually they learn that no, they have to do more. And then you tell them they have to work with someone else to build something bigger than they could do on their own. And I don't like talking to people. I'm an introvert. What?
Mm.
You just can see the things happening in there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what do you mean? I just, that's the other one. People still think that one person can create an application that will take the world by storm. Doesn't happen very often anymore. Maybe Wordle is the closest one that's happened recently before it got bought by a big company, right? So I don't know if there are
I
any
was
other
about
ones.
Winzip. That's the first one that came to my mind. That was also created by.
Yeah, but that's going way back. But
Mhm.
but modern days, you don't really see that happening. So you tell people, no, you're going to have to collaborate. Even if you're a one-man band or one person thing, you're going to have to collaborate with a designer, a graphic artist, a musician, perhaps, if you want some music for your game or whatever. You can't do it all on
And
your own.
the interesting part is that I know a few people who are one band musicians, and they usually have people doing the lightning and doing the
Exactly.
sound and
Yeah,
everything. So even there, most of them, they don't do it on their own.
exactly. This is the thing. And I guess the other part that people struggle with when they come from whatever they were doing before into academia and become a software developer and want to be a developer is the how do I collaborate with other people? And we don't at university. Yeah, there's lots and lots of people about, and you don't have that much collaboration in many classes. Mathematicians in particular, when I've bumped into them, they've said, oh, this is the first class where I get to work with other people. This is great. And maths is a very solitary pursuit in that sense. But we don't give students the skills with which how to teach them how to collaborate or how to have working agreements or any of the other things that you probably see quite often with your clients and work with your collaborators, right? So
And I would
this is
say
all
that
new. Yeah.
teaching might also be something where most of the work is done on your own, in a sense that
Yeah,
most of
in that
and
sense,
it
I'm
changes
very
a little bit, but in that sense, yeah, a lot of the teaching happens alone, or a teacher alone. And even if the few teachers that I've known in the past that were a duo job, were actually doing the first part of the week was one teacher and the second part of the week was the other. So that was no collaboration, that was no pairing, that was just
no,
splitting
exactly.
the time.
That's the part I keep missing. Only a few times have I had the paired teaching experience, as it were. It doesn't happen very often. It's usually, again, we go back to the, oh, what do you mean you want two people to be doing the same thing at the same time? Can't have that. That's not efficient. Yep.
I do ask sometimes if they prefer then to be on a plane where there's only one pilot, if they prefer, because that's much cheaper as well. Why don't we do that?
Yeah.
Because it's a very expensive industry. So
For safety. Yeah. Gets even more expensive if the plane goes down. Yep.
yeah, but this is about the quality. We want to make sure that people are moved from one
Yeah.
place to the other in a safe way. Well, education is also a very important thing. We're creating the future for a lot of people, so maybe we
Me
should
too.
care more about quality at that level as well.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, we
Yeah.
see already so many money problems in education that I think that's probably the least of the problems.
Yep. I guess the other thing I should quickly back up in case people are wondering where my accent goes. I grew up in the States,
Hmm.
and in 1986 moved to Scotland to study for thinking I'd go back to the US for after a couple of years, but ended up getting married, and I have now been here ever since. So if you hear an American accent, then that's the formative years growing up there. Anyways, yeah.
But that indeed it has an impact on who you are, and indeed
Oh,
that
absolutely.
explains.
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay, let's move into that first question. What is something that people usually don't know about you, but has influenced you so far?
This is one of those things that is more common than people tend to assume, I guess, is that computing wasn't my first degree, nor my second degree. Ended up being my third degree, as it were. My undergraduate was German and international relations. I did a year in Germany, in Hanover, as an exchange student in the late 70s. And then I liked that so much, I went back to do a year in West Berlin at the Free University in the 80s.
Wow.
That was also fun. But after that, I then went on and the reason I came to Aberdeen was to do a master's degree in terrorism. And in particular, the person there took me on because I wanted to do a master's and I didn't want to wait and reapply for master's in the US so that I could just quickly go and, yeah, of course you can come and do one here. Got there and person said, why don't you just do a PhD? You can do a PhD.
Oh.
Don't need to do anything more. We can just switch the degree over to a PhD. So I ended up doing a PhD focusing on...
You went in for a master and you ended up doing a PhD.
Yep. Yep. Along the way, I got married and yeah, stayed. But yeah, ended up doing a PhD on left-wing terrorism in West Germany. Near the end of my
In the
PhD,
80s. In the 80s.
in the late 80s, I was writing up my PhD in 1980, late 1989, and all of a sudden the wall came down, and lo and behold, many of the people I was writing about were found living in East Berlin, Eastern Germany. So I was like, oh, now what do I do? So, yeah.
Wow.
Other friends, I did a bit of teaching, finished my PhD, did a bit of teaching at various universities here and there, supply teaching, more or less, I guess. And then a friend said, oh, hang on, you're doing the same thing. She had done a conversion degree to do computing, which is where her husband was working. And I followed the same path. Did the same thing I'm now teaching my students, did a one-year degree, did move into computing, got a job contract at the University of Aberdeen. Those part-time contracts, those short-term contracts got changed into a permanent contract, and I haven't looked back. It's just been non-stop fun and excitement.
And did you have a lot of experience with computers at that moment that you did that, or?
When I first did, I'd had my main experience in computers had been using, what was it? My sister had an Amiga many years ago. And then latterly, in the, when was that? Late 80s, I had a computer at home, 5.25-inch floppies for writing up my PhD, but that was about it. Oh no, actually for that, I ended up writing everything in longhand, going to the university, which ended up being St. Andrews because my professor changed universities, writing up for a couple of hours and then taking my disk home, write some more the next day and then go back again the next day and write up more. So yeah.
Did you just casually say that you followed your professor from one university to another?
Yeah, when your PhD supervisor changes universities, you have the option of either staying where you are or following them to the new university. So I started
I've never heard about that. So that's and how does that work then? Because then you need to typically universities in a different city, completely somewhere else. So you have
to happily between. At the same time, my wife was changing jobs, so we needed to move house. So we ended up moving halfway between Aberdeen and St. Andrews. So we were on the outskirts of Dundee. So, and my neighbor at the paper mill outside of St. Andrews. So I got a ride with him most days. and then would catch the bus from the paper mill to where he was working. The paper
Wow.
mill is now gone. It is now a brewery / distillery. But yeah.
This
So
is wonderful story because by the way, I changed universities. I was already
yeah,
married, so I need
like
to change my partner. We need to change a few things.
yeah,
So
the timing was perfect. Yeah.
and did your professor talked about changing jobs before it was actually announced? Did you feel something coming,
He
or
did. Yeah, he did. He did. Um, and it worked out well. Yeah.
because I can imagine that yeah, you're all busy in your PhD, all focused, and all of a sudden it's like there's a message. Oh, by the way,
What
I'm
do I
moving.
have
What
to
do you want
do?
to do?
Yeah. Well, what are the right options? And yeah, no, because my wife was changing roles, it worked out well for us. And I thought,
Yeah.
yeah, no, because the other option is if I didn't have him, if I would have stayed at the University of Aberdeen at that point, my supervisor would have been at a different university, so the collaboration would have been less effective. He'd still continue being a supervisor, but it wouldn't have worked as well.
Mm.
So from that
But
point of view, I wanted the connections with him and the doors he could open. Yeah.
yeah, I can also imagine that in at the end of the 80s, remote working collaboration, yeah, would have probably a lot harder than it is today, and it's
Indeed.
already hard today.
Yeah. But I guess out of that, the part that stayed with me was this whole notion of different perspectives on the things I was doing, and more familiarity with social sciences and some of the theories that go with that about group work, collaboration, um, economic, social pressures on things, which are all the stuff I now bring to bear
I
teaching
was about to
Greek
say that
aspects of
seems that
software development, right? And different perspectives and bits of psychology, social psychology, all of that stuff is all relevant, and isn't the stuff that my colleagues are attuned to because their backgrounds come from the research sides of computing science. Um, how can I get it to do this particular thing, and how do we um, get things to read things and be aware of what the text is and how the text can be turned into to various commands and stuff. So natural language programming, natural language generation are the things my colleagues are heavily interested in.
yeah, and I think both of them are important. Of course, we need to know
Yeah, and they're
technically
now
what
all
to
feeding
do.
into the AI aspects of software. Yeah.
Hmm. Okay, let's move to that second question. And I kind of talked already about lots of different things that you've been
Yeah.
doing. Was there anything? So maybe let's go back even earlier. Was there something that you were destined to become when you were young, or
Oh, go.
something?
As a kid, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I guess in high school, I kept thinking, oh yeah, go work in the foreign service. I can travel, but which is why I was doing international relations and the politics things. But and then during that period, I guess there were times when I thought, oh, um, what's it called? Political economy and stuff would be interesting, and those other aspects of why countries do what they do and how they develop and stuff. So, but whether I can't think of what that would have led to. Um, I knew I didn't want to do what my dad was doing, which was he was a car and truck mechanic, always working on pickups and things like that. So, and mom was growing up in the States. Mom was a housewife. She didn't have a job when as my mom. She had been a secretary, I believe, at one point or another. But that was about it.
Completely different times, I would say. Uh,
Yeah,
and
neighbors that I often saw were bakers and things like that, which is the profession my brother went into. Um, he became a baker. Um, quite happy with that. Yeah.
I can imagine from a family point of view that that might be interesting as well. But it shows already a little bit the different possibilities or the different backgrounds that you have. And then, yeah,
Yeah,
you talked already a lot about, how would I say, the accidental career that you had with moving in all kinds of
absolutely. Yeah.
directions.
But I'm not the only one. I know at least three or four others who did follow that same path, did a conversion degree into software and 1 year computing degree in Scotland or elsewhere, um, and have since gone on and are lead developers, run companies, um, because you learn what you need to learn. And I know several who never did any university study and are in the software industry and do quite fine. Imposter syndrome hits them every now and then. That you hear over a beer, over a coffee when you're in a quiet moment, but for the most part, that they do perfectly fine, and no one knows until they that you're having that conversation, and they go, "What now?" Yeah, so
It's yeah, I think it's important. This is for me one of the reasons why I like so much these first questions, because indeed we have so much or so little insight in what backgrounds that people have, and a
yeah,
little bit like you say, in the movies it looks like everything is very easy, and then we feel we have to do the same thing, and typically someone who teaches you or the senior is years ahead of you, and you think that they always were like that. Sometimes they have trouble even talking about, or they don't want to talk about how hard it was in the beginning, or we don't have that conversation, and so it's really good to yeah, to take
you
some
never
time to show a little bit where things are.
absolutely, and you don't always think to ask them these things either, because there's other things you want to ask that are when you're having those conversations. But
Yeah, and this is a little bit why I want to take that time to get to
yeah,
know each other a little bit from a different, because indeed I had some of the background, or your background, because we're going back already a while, that we've been having some conversations, but
absolutely, yeah,
the depth that I heard here, I've never had any idea about that. So thanks for sharing this.
you're welcome.
Let's move to that third question. If what is currently, or I would say currently, what is your biggest challenge, and why is that a good thing for you? At least the one that you want to be open on the internet, of course.
Yeah, I guess it's the one I keep going is what's the right way to, or not right, suggest there's a correct way. Um, the one I keep finding is how do I teach the agile processes, and for my part, I'm just focusing on really simple. What are the simplest things I can teach students so that when they leave the university and they go into industry, because that's what most of them tend to do. A few go on to do PhDs or another master's, but most will go on and become software developers. What are the simplest things I can teach them? Bits of Scrum, bits of XP, because you need the practices. But how do I get that across in a simple way? Um, and I keep trying different approaches, and it doesn't always go as smoothly as I think it's going to do. And you can never tell from one group of students from one class to the next class what things are going to work. I keep trying different things, and I have a process that I use for the most part. Works perfectly fine for the master's students. Doesn't work quite as well for the undergraduates, because the way their classes are organized differently from the masters. For the master's students, when I get to them at that point, that's the only class they have, because it's part of a large group project. I can schedule any time during the day. We'll meet from 9 till 5, and you have a nice routine. You can do training/workshops, and that works really well. But for undergraduates, it's 2 hours a week and an hour here and an hour there type of thing. So it's more broken. And they're
Which
not
is
always.
also something we see in the agile world, that if you don't have a fixed team being there all the time, it's
Yeah,
harder to focus, it's harder to learn stuff. There's a lot. So, but yeah, reality is sometimes, like you say, with these
yeah,
undergraduates, that is the reality, and that makes a lot of things harder. And do
yeah.
you have already some things, and of course, typically we don't go into tips, but do you have already some things that were you try to work out in this to make things better in
Yeah,
that
I
way?
have, I guess one of the benefits of COVID, I guess, is I had time to think. Um, Things never got to the stage where I could just sit and watch TV all day, which is I know what some people were doing. I kept going, how could you do that? I don't have time for that. I have too much stuff. Um, because of Brexit, thank you, Conservative Party. We were also losing staff at the same time who were going off to different things. So our staff numbers dropped at the same time as COVID was started getting going. So we had more teaching um, than ideal. But I still carved some time to run a few workshops that friends were running. I would take part in those, which gave me time to think and process my thoughts onto what I wanted to do. And I realized I could do a book on collaboration. Um, that worked. Then I did another one last summer, which condensed that stuff. And from that, I was finally at, this is the bit I needed, which is our collaboration rules, which I'm now using in
Mm.
when I teach my software engineering students. And that seems to work okay. I can keep coming back to those and pointing to just follow these guidelines and they'll keep you straight, which is something I've been looking for a long time. What are the
That,
simple rules I can give them um,
but
that will
I
keep them
like
straight?
that because it's really yeah, having just guidelines and having kind of rules of kind of things like, okay, this is how we're going to try to work together. That is
Yeah,
so important. I've a couple
guiding
of years
yeah,
guiding principles like that. And like
yeah,
a couple of years ago, we were building a house, and it was only when we were finishing up that I was clearing my thoughts a little bit. What could I learn? It was like, yeah, I should have had some guidelines, and with every constructor should have a way like, how do we contact each other? What's the best way to contact you? What kind
yeah,
of tools you like? What's the moment? Just these simple conversations would have helped so much and removed so much frustration and friction between everyone, I would say. And sometimes it's that easy, but easy doesn't mean yeah that you thought about it up front and that you spend time thinking about it or discussing it.
yeah,
So I can definitely see it's very interesting that you say because of COVID you were kind of forced to sit home. You were yeah maybe thinking a little more while before there was no time, or you were just running around and didn't have that.
exactly. Yeah, exactly. That's what before that, it was like just running. I've got this, I've got that, and I didn't see the need at that point for um, the forcing myself to pause to think and to reflect on what I had, yeah, and what I wanted to do with things. But I find by writing things out, it clarifies my thinking and draws threads together that are just milling about in my head, as it were.
Mm.
And
But
it's
that's
something I keep forgetting, and then remembering that. Oh yeah, I got to write it out. That'll help might clarify my thinking. Yeah,
That's in itself a very good tip that we sometimes, yeah, like you say, we sometimes know it and then we forget it and we have to relearn it, and we run into that. And it
sadly.
doesn't matter how young or how old we are, how inexperienced or experienced it is. Yeah, sometimes we have to relearn the tips that we already learned, and I regularly see that I'm working with someone and asking me a question, and I reply with something, and then say, "That's actually what the problem that I'm having myself, and I should learn it for myself." And I know it, and I teach it, but
Exactly. We're our own worst clients sometimes. Yep.
thanks for sharing that because it's
Mm.
really helpful to do that to have that extra little nugget in there.
Yeah.
Let's move to the next topic. Your you already talked a little bit about your passion, about how you got into your career, into multiple
Yeah.
things, but it feels a lot of passion. It feels a lot of like drive and everything that you want to do. What is the secret? What is there? What drives you? Do you know where that is coming from?
I guess I'm not sure. I don't know. It seems the right thing to do is to share what I know, share what I've learned to help people learn things. And I
And
don't know if
and
that
is
was
that something you
academic.
always had when you were young, for example? Was that
I,
something similar?
I don't know. Trying to think back to childhood, and the memories that pop into my head are um, various episodes with friends, but I don't remember any of those, or no, the ones that are bubbling through my head just now don't show me teaching people things or whatever. It's snatches of conversations with friends, memories doing various games or whatever, watching things on TV. Yeah, the usual things, but not teaching stuff per se. I don't know where that came from. That maybe that was part of what grew out of my academic experience as being a student and just enjoying that classroom setting, I guess.
And
I'm
I
not sure.
assume that you, well, you kind of, I hear a lot of curiosity in your career, in your accidental career.
Yeah,
Moving from one to another is like, hey, well, that's interesting. Let I got an opportunity. Let's take that. Is there
yeah,
one?
exactly. And then that's the sharing part, I guess. Maybe that's the part that
Mm,
drives me is the desire to share what I've learned with other people. Maybe to make their path less difficult than what I had or whatever. I don't know.
mm. Is there anything you want to share about how difficult that path was for you?
Mm, I guess the part to share would be that every person's path is different, and what seems easy um, doesn't always come easy.
Mm.
But I mean, yeah, I did do a PhD, but that, like many others, it was um, more perseverance than being clever, as it were.
Isn't that something that is?
My sister was the gifted academic student in the family, not me per se. Um, if I remember correctly, I don't have them to hand, but my grades were always B's and A's, but not and tended to be closer to the B boundary than the straight A's things which my sister had. So she was consistently the academic who excels in the stuff she studies and is unhappy. Yeah, but
And did you?
always good
But
grades and
no, no. But
surprised.
it's. I think
Yeah,
I I find it very interesting that because if you're from such a background where it's the perseverance is really needed to get there, and then yeah,
yeah,
just accidentally move from masters to PhD and everything there. How does that help, or does that help you as for teaching to your students? Because I can imagine that there is always a few gifted students, but there's a lot more that actually need to work hard.
yeah.
Does that
Indeed.
help
This is
you, that experience?
yeah, this is what I tell them. Yeah, I do. Yeah, yeah. That you can't expand. Yeah, sorry, you can't expect to be an expert the first time you do something. You have to put effort in and try and practice. And
Mm.
remind them that yeah, okay, first time you play a new video game or something, because that's probably something I assume they can more easily relate to than other things. You're not going to do it at super expert level, but you're going to keep having to be respawned and start over and keep working your way through things, right? It's not you play it once and you're the expert level immediately. You have to practice. You don't just pick up a drumsticks and start playing the drum at expert level, right? You have to put in the hours and the time.
And I think this is also what makes it most interesting. And in the end, the people that do persevere, and I think it's yeah, again, we look at the end result of someone on stage and we think, oh, he's a wonderful drummer, but no, it took a lot of practicing time, mostly alone, which is very boring as a drummer,
Yes,
I would think. Uh,
yeah,
and it's only after you've done a lot of that that you can be on stage and have all the applause and everything, but you have to work hard. And in the end, that is the rewarding part. But yeah, there is. I think it's for almost everything that people achieve. It's when you also know, or at least it is for me, when you spend really hard time doing it, working in it, and of course it's harder if you completely hate it than if you really love it.
well,
But
yes,
I've noticed for myself that by doing stuff, I started to love things as well. It's not just by, oh, it's easy and that's what makes it love me. No, it's perseverance, is seeing, hey, I spent some time this week and now I'm better at it. That's for me. Is
yeah,
that the same for you?
indeed. I spent time at it. I'm better at it. I now appreciate some of the nuances that I didn't understand before because I've put the effort in. Yeah.
And because you had that experience, you try to bring it across to your students. How do they react when you say that? Is that like, yeah, but that's easy for you because you're the professor, or how did they react there?
Um, some appreciate it if I tell them, yeah, yeah, I had similar things, or the other one that is more common is I will explain that, yeah, um, we're in Scotland, you need to practice your English. We have a large number of foreign students as a rule, where English isn't their first language. And point out to them when they're starting, you have to practice your English repeatedly. Yes, you'll make mistakes. It's not easy. It is hard. And then I explained that, yeah, I spent several years as an exchange student in Germany, mispronouncing German words and getting the wrong things and making silly mistakes. And um, I probably missaid words that were wrong, and made the embarrassing various mistakes, using completely the wrong word, which led to laughter. It happens. It's part of learning a new language. But yeah, get over that. Your fellow students will understand and they'll appreciate it better, because later you're going to be collaborating and you'll need to talk more and understand each other more. Um, so
Mm.
go out there, make mistakes, have fun, talk lots in English, read, um, practice listening to various things and saying things, not using translator apps on your phone or whatever, but talk. You'll have more
Yeah.
fun. And later,
Well,
when you're done, when you graduate and you go back to your careers, you'll be more proficient in English, which can only help your career. So,
I do think for me, sometimes translator apps help me in doing some stuff. But yeah, it's all about the talking. It's all about daring to do it.
yeah,
I was really bad in French and English when I was in school, and school didn't really help me because it was so much more about grammar and writing perfect and whatever. And really, like you say, for me, the big aha about the language is start talking, making mistakes, and understanding that, hey, here is a stranger that does understand me. Even if I made five mistakes in that sentence, I got my message across and I understood what this person is trying to tell me.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, that those little breakthroughs are the fun part.
Exactly. Okay, you talked about a breakthrough. Well, let's see what do you consider your biggest achievement, your biggest
So
thing so
I
far
don't
of all?
know. I guess the silly one, silly but not so silly, is um, I'm a grandparent now. So my daughter found a husband and has had her own child now. So now I get to see whether the things I taught her to be a parent are going to work. Um, right. So the greatest challenge, as it were, can we raise our kids to be good parents? So far so good, it seems. So um, So that's
I,
one achievement.
I like that definition. I like that definition because sometimes we think, okay, can we create our children as great people in whatever that they're doing? But great parents is the next level, I would say, because being
Yeah,
a good
ergonomics.
person, it as I think, well, for me, I still I don't have any grandchildren, but for me, parenting is really, yeah, this is where you see all the boundaries and everything that you want
Yeah.
to do good, and then something happens in the household, and it's very tempting to, yeah, whatever, yeah, that is sometimes challenging. Uh, so creating a child that actually is a great parent, that's a level that I didn't think
We'll
about.
see. That, yeah, grandchild's only 3.5 months now, so still early days. But we'll see.
But I guess you can already see some of the things about, okay, how do they think and how,
Yeah. Otherwise, so professionally, I guess the greatest achievements and stuff would be the uh, yeah, getting things published on LeanPub. Fine. I just create an account and type it in Markdown, and it's a book. But we're just getting that done,
mm.
finishing it. Um, that that seems like a big achievement, and at the moment, other ones are
Well, the one
yeah,
question about,
academically, yeah, academically finishing getting a large conference to Aberdeen, which was good, um, despite various challenges along the way. So yeah,
the one question I have that is typically below the question about biggest achievement is that this is the moment to brag, of course, that is a possibility.
yeah.
Is that easy for you as a person to brag, or is that something like, well, that
It's
is a hard
hard.
time?
There was someone posted something. What was his name? Udo. I can't remember his last name. On LinkedIn recently, but he was in an open space gathering and ran a session where you could only talk about your successes. And he
Mm.
said it started very quiet, but eventually people got used to it, and started being more positive about things they have done. I find it's hard to talk about achievements, but maybe that's me. Maybe that's the way that we're socialized. I don't know.
But that's why it's a question,
It's a
because I
mixture
see.
between not wanting to brag and not
Mhm.
wanting to, um, not being sure whether something I think is an achievement for me is what someone else would account as an achievement as well, I guess. Yeah.
Hmm. That's an interesting side,
I'm
because
not
indeed
sure.
these are two different kind of things.
Yeah.
Um,
And the other one, I guess, is sometimes things that we see as achieve or that I see as achievement is not something happens happened a while ago. So it's not in current memory, as it were, as something recent, but and achievements I always think are things that are recent, not things in the past, I guess. But
That's interesting because the moment that you're doing it, you don't consider it an achievement yet because you're fully into that. And then once it's gone, you don't think about it anymore because it's
you on to the
past.
next thing, right? Yeah. We don't pause enough to reflect on what we've done. Yeah.
I
Don't
like
stop.
that indeed. The pausing helps sometimes to reflect and to achieve that. Okay, what did I achieve? Because yeah, like you already talked about, accidental career, moving from one university
Yeah.
to another, moving different kind of things. There's a lot of achievements, um, and then you say, well, that first book that I published, and indeed the finishing, because there's a lot more people starting in a book than finishing a book,
Yeah.
and yeah, it is hard work, but it's again about the perseverance, yeah, to keep working on it and keep doing it. That is part of it, and then once it's done, we might forget that it's that it's
Yeah.
actually an achievement. Okay, let's move to the next question. Do you have a personal agility tip to share? Is there
Mm.
something that you say, yeah, that's a good one that people should know?
Time boxing, I think, is the one I keep coming back to because I
Mhm.
know I can't do everything, so I have to set myself time boxes, usually by the day, or today's goal is to do X, and I will spend 2 hours on this or whatever, or um, usually hits or becomes most obvious in the summer when I'm revising courses for the following academic year. And I know I can't spend forever on one course because I need to update 5 or 6 things. So I give myself a week to do this week, the focus is this, next week is that, and then incremental iterations, right? So next year it'll get improved. And if I don't have too many things, then I can come back to things again in a couple of weeks' time. But um, that's the only way I can
And
keep moving forward with stuff, right? So
and what I'm hearing is not, well, it's more than time boxing. It's also cutting up everything in small enough chunks so that you can finish them in a time box. Is that, did I hear that
yeah,
correct?
that's true. Yeah, I keep thinking it was time box, but you're right. It is
It's more
incremental
than that.
iterations. Yeah, yeah, it's the full thing. Yeah.
I assume that the time boxing is the thing that forces you to do that kind of stuff, which is yeah, indeed
Yeah.
not always the easy part. But I like that as a principle of time boxing. I've seen it with teams as well, and many people say like, yeah, but that time box is impossible. I can't do it. And once people get into their head of like, okay, let's try to do it, then it forces them indeed to go for the next step, like cutting it up and what can I do? Because I
Hmm.
loved so much what you say is that you want to do something else, but let's first in this time box finish it, and then there is time free available in the next time box or whatever to do something else. But then something is already done. It
Yeah,
also ties
exactly.
back to what you said earlier. Then we forget that we achieved something because it's in smaller steps and whatever. But still,
Yeah.
you did. Yeah, it's that time boxing. It you also called perseverance before about, yeah, keep working on stuff. Um,
Hmm.
I it all ties very nicely together, and I see that so much in the agile space. We talked about technical excellence, but there is also that kind of excellence and how could we achieve things, how could we do something in smaller time boxes. Let's cut things and let's keep
Yeah.
working on that.
Or just make things, slice things smaller so they become more achievable and they'll take longer, but it's the only way for some bigger things to get done. You can't
Could
do
you say some
everything.
more? Why does it take longer, or what's the dynamic that you see there?
Um, if there's a really so the first book I did, 101 collaboration tips, ideas for collaboration. I knew I couldn't do all of it in one sitting, so I had to start small. Like, oh, I've got this list of 100 and something thing ideas. I'll write one. I'll write out 3 a day, and I'll do that for X number of weeks, and that'll get me to where a first draft,
Mhm.
and then I can do more later. But by breaking it into really small things, like that were sized in an easy to pick up and put down manner, I could do a few here and there and get through them.
I really like that by indeed that, again, that focus, smaller
Yeah.
time boxes. You finish something and then okay, you can continue. You might be, well, maybe the wrong word to use, but distracted somewhere in between two sessions. You
There's
might do
always
other stuff.
something, right? There's always something that'll break your flow. The phone will ring, someone will knock on the door, whatever, right? So you
Mm.
never
And
get
so
your
what happens if you're focusing on something and there is someone at the door? You let them there, or how does that work? How do you pick up the work again?
depends.
Or
I've experimented with various options. One is you say, I'm coming in, hold on a second, I'm in the middle of this email. I have to finish this train of thought and I don't want to have to go back to it. Okay, now I'm done. I can talk to you. Other one is you talk to them and then you try to go back to where you were. And I find
and
that is
and
harder to do. Yeah.
and do you have tricks on being able
Well,
to go back? Do you write something down or where you were, or how does that work?
no, I've read various things on that and I haven't. found any of them work for me. Yeah.
That's why I was asking, because I know many people are struggling with that. That is
There's no
because
simple
indeed we
one.
all get distracted. There is something, a phone, whatever. But how do you go back to the thing that you're working on? And
Yeah.
partially you said it already. If you're working in small bits, if you're working in time boxes, okay, there is already a part that is done. So if something isn't getting done, maybe you restart or whatever. But it's smaller. But sometimes even in that small stuff, we're still interrupted, I would
Yeah.
guess.
Still a pain. Oh well. Yeah. Go. Yeah.
I
No, I
want to
don't.
move to remote work, and you already
Mm.
a little bit, or I made the assumption when your PhD, the professor was moving that you would, yeah, remote would probably
Yeah.
not well. Did you do other remote work before COVID? How did that work for you? When did you started to work
So
remote?
in as I, ooh, I guess remote working. Yeah, for a PhD, I live then I wasn't able to live in St. Andrews at the time when I was officially a student there. I lived 50-minute drive away thereabouts. So I would write up and then go into the office in the evening, type things into the computer. Um, so that was sort of I was doing the work at home, but not,
Mm.
and then going into the office, but that was not quite the way remote we think of it these days. Um, so the closest would have been later working at the university now in my current role, commuting with laptop and working at home occasionally when I could work at home and not have to go into the office. But that was not very frequent, you know. But it was always a nice change of pace. But we didn't have remote meetings the way we do now. That part wasn't set up, but you could work from home, as it were. But that was it. So the remote working was teaching for 2 years remotely, and during that time, I learned um, how to do various things. They didn't always work as effectively as I wanted. Other times, though, that some things did work better than they did in person, or rather,
Mm.
yeah, because the when you're remote, everyone's on the same at the same level as opposed to trying to do some things in person and having a cohort that were remote who would get a different experience. But that was
That
one class that I was able to convince people, no, we're going to do this one completely remote, because that way, um, when the students and their teams were working together, they were all in the same boat. They were all in the same situation, and I could also have teams talk to each other, or one team talk to another team and compare notes with where they are and what their ideas were and stuff, and get feedback, as opposed to some being in person and some being remote and it being unhappy for everybody.
that's really is an interesting, yeah, look at that. That indeed, even in that situation, you could say let's try something different. Let's try this remote.
Yeah,
How did you come about that, or what is there a tip around that?
there. I think I'm not sure. I guess the main reason was that particular class, the way I had organized it in person previously, was everyone was in one big room
Mm.
and everything was done in that space together. Now since COVID, when we've come back, I that course is still taught by me, but it's now taught slightly differently because we don't have the ability to have everybody in the same classroom at the same time, sadly. The room that was perfect is now being used by another class, so it can't do that. And the university doesn't have enough of these big collaborative spaces, unfortunately.
Yeah, I can definitely. see that COVID had an impact on these kind of things, on how that is working there. But that's reality that happened. What is there any tip around teaching remote that you have? Because a lot of us we're working remote, but you're teaching remote.
Ooh,
That has a special thing, I would say. What is there anything special?
no, the things I've done remotely, the best parts have come from other people, either in the agile space or service design space, where things that were done remotely by people that are already familiar, get
And
people to
is there
talk.
anything that you've learned there that you want to share that for you said, hey, I picked that up from someone else, but let's.
Um, I think I've seen them all being used by everybody already. Um, the give people time to think to themselves, put them into small groups, breakout rooms or whatever to chat to a small group. One, two, four, all from liberating structures type of approaches. Do
And is
whatever.
that easy at university? Because I can imagine these are very large groups. How does that work to do one for all?
Doing it remotely. One of the platforms we had, it was a real pain to do, but since we've moved to Teams for that, for things that works okay. It's better than it used to be. The previous platform was just ridiculous. Every time you put people into a team, and brought them back again, you couldn't put them back into the same teams, or you had to do it manually, which for a class of 60 took forever.
But
Anyway,
basically, what you're saying is tools matter, especially in the remote
oh yes,
world.
absolutely,
If you
yeah,
have worse, bad tools, try to experiment with your tools, learn how they work, and see if there's other tools that work better. Because I think
you're right. I'd
we
forgotten about
sometimes are so stuck in a certain tool, and we think, yeah, this is what life is remote. Well, maybe it's true, but maybe it's the tool that forces you. Yeah, if you have to manually put everybody into breakout rooms, probably at some point people might decide, let's not do breakout rooms, it's too hard. Yeah,
Yeah,
but that's a technical way to deal with that. So thanks
I
for sharing
now
that.
you mention it, I remember reading various people's thoughts on this somewhere. Must have been Twitter or something, or a Slack thing, agile coaching or Slack group or whatever. But yeah, things people had said about ways to do things, on different platforms. Yeah, it seems so long ago, but it was only yesterday. Yeah,
It's but thanks for sharing, because sometimes we need to again think and learn from each other and see what else.
yeah.
Let's move to that next question about the book. What's a book that you want to talk about?
Oh,
Do you remember what book that you originally said about?
I think I saw that. Yeah, yeah. I don't have the book in front of me.
I think I have, if it's the same book that you're talking
Yeah,
about.
Rolling Rocks Downhill, which is a
So that's the
variation.
one.
That's the
And
one.
you
Yeah,
and I put the goal next to it because you already said that it's a variation to the
yeah,
goal. That's what
because the Clark's one, as it says there on the title, the TOC of business. Yeah,
yeah, so
yeah,
agile and
great.
TOC business novel, indeed.
Yeah, yeah. Perhaps a little known thing. It was supposed to be three-part. It was supposed to be three books. It was supposed to be a
Oh.
trilogy, but he never finished the trilogy. I have read the first chapter of what would have been the second book, but um, yeah. So I was fortunate. Actually, now that I think about it, Clark is is probably the first agile person I met outside of in person to
Mm.
validate some of the things I'd read in various books and things. But he ran a one-day workshop in Edinburgh when he was still in Edinburgh, and yeah, yeah. But because of that, eventually he was looking for people to proofread and give him feedback on his book. So I read a number of drafts before it became a finally published version. I think the only other person that read more drafts than I did was his wife, Winnie. But yeah, so
But
yeah,
yeah, that's and
but
yeah,
but
that
it
depends a little
becomes the
bit
book.
on how much people have.
It's so obvious, but it puts the ideas that you can read in the goal about theory of constraints and how to um, the constraints will guide you, and you're always looking to widen the bottleneck, so you can get more throughput on whatever it is you're doing, whether it be widgets through your factory or software items out of into production and deployed, right? So how can we overcome these issues? And in his book, does it in a nice novel, as a novel, so it's a nice story, um, covering each of these things and number of how does the cafeteria serve more meals. Ta-da! There's another lesson, um, and batch sizing and things like that. Yeah, all of these
Yeah,
things that we know eventually pick up on, but he spells them out in a nice manner.
I think it's yeah. I've loved the book. I've actually at some point I bought a bunch of books for a company I was working with. That said, okay, this is I don't know, I think 10 books, and multiple people could read one of these books, and that was
Yeah,
indeed one of the books. I also like that you make the link to the goal, because indeed, for me, the goal is a nice example of a business novel that. But that is doing it in a completely different environment. Let's put it like that. It's yeah,
yeah,
it's amazing how many years ago that book was written and how relevant it still is. And at the same time, it's good that people like Clark are translating it to other industries and other places. Like, okay, you can actually learn. There's still other lessons and other things to do that.
there are.
And
There,
um, and theory of constraints is at so many levels so important. It's amazing how people want to change everything and improve everything, and no, let's look at the bottleneck. Let's look where that the biggest problem is. Let's focus there, and later we can look at other stuff when they become the bottleneck. Optimizing the rest of the company doesn't make any sense if you don't look at the bottleneck. It will just make us more frustrated, and yeah, it doesn't help at all.
absolutely. Yeah, doesn't help
So
at all.
it's good that we have more people like Clark and like Elia Goldratt to talk to us about that. Hey, look a bit.
Yeah,
Uh, and I think it's amazing that not many more people know about theory of constraints. So thanks for bringing that up. Um,
yeah.
I want to move to that next question. What's a question you think I should also ask you, and what's the answer?
I don't know. Um, um, yeah, I guess. Oh, I guess this is the part where I can mention the other book, the book, the more recent book I finished, um,
Mm.
which is teaching team collaboration, the human side of software development, because
That you finished this summer,
I
am I correct?
was looking to see if I had, because one of the issues in teaching software engineering is that the software engineering textbooks, or many of them, talk about the usual things you expect. Um,
Mhm.
how to organize your software into nice modular components, something about version control, something about gathering requirements from your client, something about testing, and something and then later about validation and deployment. But nowhere in there do they normally talk about how the team operates as a team and how people
Mm.
talk to each other, how they iron out their difficulties, how they iron out their schedule so they can meet and collaborate together when they're going to meet and collaborate, because they can't. Students tend to think, as it's described in the textbook, I will build up my database layer, work out what that layer should be. Then I'll build the components to connect to the database, and then I'll build whatever the client's going to see as the front end. and build it in horizontal, which is not what you really want to do, right? So,
And that's why you wrote this book. That's the one you're talking about, right?
that book, correct? Yes. Finished that in August. Yep. So
And
that
one of the things that I like about LeanPub is that, especially as a professor, I can imagine that you do teach something, but every year you learn new things. You can adapt that book, and of course now it was
yes,
finished before the
exactly.
end of this year. But I can imagine you can just say to your students next year, like, okay, this you just buy it and you have the latest version, and yeah.
Yeah, this one is aimed at the people that teach the things, not the students. But I
Mm.
realized that was perhaps the audience I should be addressing,
But
so I
that's
can spread the word to my fellow academics that yeah, you pick whatever your normal textbook is, and then use this to help you with the other part to get your students to collaborate better.
that is indeed why it's interesting for other people like myself to read the book. But I was always kind of assuming that it was actually aimed more at your students. I
Yeah,
didn't realize that you didn't do that.
that's
You
okay.
didn't.
I
Well,
haven't. I've debated whether I should write a version like that for them, or a version that addresses it from their perspective. Um,
mm,
might still do that. We'll see. Yeah.
yeah, that's indeed yeah, an extra thing that you could do at some point. That is indeed something to.
Indeed, I keep thinking of other things I could do without it, and that same space. How to teach better, how to help students move on with the next thing. So many things that just keep bubbling up there, but not enough time in the day. Yeah.
You already talked about, yeah, indeed, a lot of things and a lot of interest. So I can imagine that, and I guess your day-to-day job is already so demanding that, yeah, and like you already said, you work on daily basis with some of these students to teach them
Yeah.
some stuff that actually they're not taught in many places. At university. So yeah, I can imagine that those who are interested, yeah, need a lot of time to be taught because they don't know. You talked, and I want to maybe briefly talk a little bit about it. You said earlier on that you, for the people who are interested, wherever they come from, are there many of your students that do have the same kind of background as you have, that they came from another degree or that had a life before they became a student,
Yeah.
a professional life?
The master's program I'm in charge of is not aimed at computing students or students who had a computing degree for their undergraduate degree, but aimed at people who did anything other than computing for their undergraduate degree. So that's the same
And
as me. They're all in the same boat. You know, they did something else. They did archaeology, they did business studies.
but that's
What else?
usually students. Are there many people who had a working life before or not?
Some of them come as mature students. So yeah, some of them have worked in industry. Sometimes it's been tangential to software, or was one very constrained part of software, systems administration or something, and they want to move into another area, or geography or something, and they want to move into GIS type systems or whatever. So yeah.
Okay, that's
Yeah. So
yeah,
yeah,
it's an interesting information to know
they come
about.
from a variety of backgrounds. The undergraduates all tend to be, this is their first degree, so that's one thing. But the master's students are always from somewhere else. We do have various specialized master's degrees as well for artificial intelligence and cybersecurity. But
And coming then from, again, other kind of backgrounds, or is there
this, I'm trying to think, they have a mixture. So they've all come from compute. They've all done a computing degree, but some of them have done the computing degree for a while ago and are now I'm in industry and want to move in a new direction. Yeah. So I remember there was one person we had last year who I have known since he was a teenager, um, who did his degree in Dundee and then worked in industry, data science things for various television companies in Dundee, and then wanted to advance his career and shift slightly different direction. So he did our artificial intelligence degree, so he could then go back and do things at a higher level. So
That's again a very interesting career path.
yeah,
Uh, I wanted to bring questions like that up because I think I have at this moment children that are going to university or moving
I
in that
know.
direction.
Yes.
Really people realize and think that there is no one path and there's no perfect path or whatever. It's actually a lot of people are moving in yeah, like you called you said your accidental career in multiple directions, and this is, I think, reality for many people. It's not that the other,
Absolutely.
but it's so important and it brings so much, I would say, value and also diversity for that kind of stuff. The fact that you had that career wouldn't
Mm,
surprise me. That really helped you in the kind of professor you are, thinking about, oh, it's not just writing the database and the front end or whatever. No, there is actually a lot more because you had a background that had a lot more. So I think it brings diversity for many different things. So thanks for
it,
sharing all the stories.
mhm.
I want to move to that next question. I kind of think we're going, but let's check it. Who do you think I should ask next? What's a person that you think brings a lot of
But
value?
if you've not spoken to Clark Ching, then get Clark. I know he's in New Zealand, but yeah,
And for the people that
I
didn't make
haven't spoken to him for a while, but yeah, yeah,
talk,
he's
is the person that wrote that book that we just talked about earlier.
correct.
Uh,
Yeah, yeah.
is there more where you want me to invite him?
He's an interesting person. Lots of very good storyteller, and the stories are always relevant to the topic in hand. Doesn't always seem the way at first, but um, I've noticed that in his recent um, things that are appearing on his mail list. Um, Very good stories, and he's always been a very good storyteller ever since I've known him, and he consistently seeks to improve his storytelling abilities, which is also a nice thing. Yeah, something I keep thinking I should get better at, but I haven't
But that,
found a way to make the time to improve that. Yeah.
but thanks for sharing that because we sometimes think that storytelling is just a gift, just like we talked earlier about. Okay, people learn, pick up the sticks, and they are a good drummer. Storytelling. I'm,
Yeah.
I read my youth lots and lots of books, and I know that that definitely had an impact on how I tell stories. But even there, I had to learn and craft my skills. Okay, what is important? It's sometimes well, when I was earlier, I added way too much detail in all kind of directions. Sometimes
Mhm.
like no, to look a little bit what is valuable to a story, and sometimes a sidetrack can bring an interesting other part of a story, like we see in lots of different books. But sometimes, as a teacher, we need to say, okay, what's the core and where do we want to focus?
Yes, exactly. That's the part I find more challenging. Oh, which parts should I leave out? Which things how can I make the story shorter so I can fit it into my lecture slot or whatever without.
And is that
Um,
something because you've been teaching
I've
for a long?
tried, I've tried here and there, and it doesn't always work as well as I think it should. Yeah, yeah.
But I'm hearing is that you do experiment a little bit with
I
it, and then
try. Yeah, I try to find ones that are suitable, but it doesn't always. I'm not always as successful as I think I should be. Yeah, but maybe that's just me, and I don't know. Yeah.
well, that might be probably a good thing to ask your students. But of course, your students only know one version of a story. They don't know the three different or the
This is
10 different
true.
versions of a story, except the ones that are do the year over or hear a similar story in a different kind of class. But still, it's good to experiment with it and try to learn from it. And the fact that you're, I would say, not just happy with it, it also means that you keep working on it one way or another. So that also shows something that is important about agile and about who you are. It's like not
Mhm.
just being, "Hey, I've done it for X amount of years. I can
Mhm.
just repeat the story." No, you keep wanting to improve something.
Seeking to improve one's ability. Yeah. Continuous improvement. Yeah.
That's, I think, given a lot of what you do, at least that's how it feels, with a lot of the interactions that we had. Okay, I want to end up with, well, first of all, thanking you for your time. It's always wonderful to talk again and to reconnect, even
Indeed.
though it's remote and it feels a little bit different. Um, if people want to connect with you, if they want to know and be in touch with you, what's a good way to reach out to you?
Um, LinkedIn works. Twitter works. Um,
Let's show first of all, I think that's the LinkedIn page, if I'm correct
yeah,
in.
that looks right. Yeah. Was able to get my name because I'm the only one. Um, I still find that amazing. There's what 7 billion people in the world. I'm the only one with that with my two names. Yeah.
On Twitter, you didn't do that. I'm not sure if there was no one else or just yeah.
I was probably the first of my people with my surname. Yeah. Of which there aren't that many, but still, yeah.
And I think in the beginning with Twitter, and I think we go back a long time ago with Twitter, I think it was only like eight characters or something like that that you could use.
Yeah, yeah. Think I could have gone with Bruce and been Bruce on Twitter, but I thought, no, I don't want to do that. That seems too arrogant. So I went with my surname. Yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, with all the Bruces, there was a chance that someone else would have taken it, but because
Yeah.
it was a big, it could have worked. Well, anyway, Bruce, thank you very much for your time. It's been, yeah, like I said, a wonderful conversation, like I think all the conversations we had in the past already. It's very glad to know someone who's actually not just purely into the IT part, but a little bit outside, teaching it also to students and coming from a different background, which for me is also important to show people like, hey, it's we can learn and learn some of these techniques and even teach it in an early stage for developers' careers. I would say I think that is also important. I'm glad that you focused both on, hey, this is a team aspect, but there is also the technical part. So that both of these things you
Indeed.
mentioned.
Yeah. I
So
mean, I guess the only other thing, yeah, it's nice to talk to you and to give something back to the community that keeps giving me so many useful things um, as well. I guess the other places, if people want to see me, if they come to play for Agile in Germany once a year, that's also a good place to find me. Yeah.
it's I didn't prepare that link, but I should have
No, that's all
prepared
right.
it.
You can add it in later.
It's
Yeah,
one of the I'll definitely add it into the show notes, because it's indeed one of these things where when we talk about experiments and games and little things like, okay, how could
yeah.
we do it? It's a very nice, small little, conference with actually not many places. I think, this is always, selling out rather quickly, I would think. Uh,
Yeah, exactly. Last year we were at capacity. Yeah, yeah, always consistently at capacity the last few years. Only last 2 years we've been in person again, but prior to that was remote only, and then in person just before the pandemic. Yeah, yeah,
I wasn't really aware that there was, or I already forgot. We did so many things remote that I
I
already
know,
forgot.
I know. It's there were so many things, experiments, some better than others, but so it goes. Yep. Anyways, Eves, thanks for your time. Thanks for
Thanks for your
asking me to be here. This has been good.
Same for me, same for me. Well, let's keep in touch and let's, yeah, let's, hopefully Now we can meet somewhere at some point at
Yes,
if
indeed. See you in person
when,
again. It's been a long time. Yes. Right.
thank
Take
you for
care.
watching Who's Agile, where the stories of agilists come to life. I hope you liked today's interview. Subscribe if you're not subscribed and want to get to know other agilists.